Well, you're ready to start. So Najib, you can go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Dear friends and colleagues over the world, depending where you are, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, good day for everybody. My name is Najib Al-Shurbaji, and I'm the EMEA Vice President for MedInfo 21. I'm very happy with this role and pleased for taking this responsibility forward. I would like to welcome you all to this opening session of MedInfo 21. Over the last 2 years, the world has witnessed a change in the way the conferences are held, meetings are conducted, education is offered, and healthcare is being delivered. Fighting the pandemic through the use of information and communication technology has made a history, as it is the first time that managing data on a pandemic is done through advanced application of information and communication technology, including artificial intelligence and robots and many other types of applications. The time difference and using the technology to reach out to you as efficiently as possible have been influencing our action, especially as COVID is still hitting hard in a number of countries. The decision to go virtual using teleconferencing platform instead of face-to-face opportunity that was announced in Lyon, France in August 2019 for us to meet in Australia and was witnessed a thorough discussion in a number of meetings internally at EMEA, and then our friends, and we have to apologize maybe for not being able to meet face to face. But we have the promise and we have the commitment, and we think that by the time the COVID will go, and we will meet in Australia in 2023 and in Taiwan in 2025. The conference will include live sessions, as has been announced, which will be recorded and made available for those that are unable to attend in person online. Technical and scientific papers and posters were recorded, and the full version of these will be published soon after the conference. So if you want to take notice, if you want to watch, depending on where you live, where you are in this world, you can actually follow up on the presentations and on the talks and on the scientific papers that have been presented. The selection of the title of the conference, which is One World, One Health, Global Partnership for Digital Innovation, carries three important themes in it. It is the health of the world with no exception that EMEA is trying to consider, and that innovation in digital health has no geographic limits. No one objective of EMEA is to make sure that people in all countries of the world do benefit from these innovations. And that's what we are trying to do within this MedInfo and a long history of the work of EMEA at a global level. We are trying to be innovative. We are trying to be observing to the world, trying to improve, trying to achieve equity using the information and communication technology. I would like to welcome all those who have registered to participate in the conference, including the authors, researchers, and student submissions. Thanks go to the team working behind the scene to make this happen under all the conditions, including COVID, including fires, including heat waves, including being sick, and including family commitments and professional commitments. But we are all committed to make MedInfo a success. And I hope the coming 3 days will be as successful as we would like them to be. Please visit the MedInfo 21 program on the web page, which has been announced. It gives me great pleasure to introduce the two chairs of the Scientific Program Committee, SPC, Dr. Paula Otero, who is actually moderating, and Dr. Philip Scott. But before that, and before all of this, I want to, on behalf of the team, to wish Paula a belated happy birthday. Happy birthday, Paula. although it's late by a few days, but it's never too late to say happy birthday. So on behalf of the team, I think everybody has done what they can, taking to the considerations in terms of embargo, in terms of technology, in terms of being in different locations in the world. And I must thank Elaine for her fantastic effort, being in Canada, and Paula in Argentina, and Philippe in the UK, and I'm in Jordan. And on top of all of us, we have Sabine in Sweden. So that means actually it's a global team working together to deliver as one. So I wish everybody a fantastic conference and the best possible way to benefit from the opportunity that is being offered to us through this conference and through this endeavor using the technology. And to me, in fact, using the technology to achieve what we wanted and to reach out to all those who are in different parts of the world is actually a true application of the information and communication technology in health. We have seen and we have witnessed people being treated, people diagnosed, data being collected remotely through telehealth and telemedicine and in remote ways that are offered by the technology itself. So this is a true application of that, and I would like to encourage everybody to look at the presentations that are made, because they are all of very high quality, and the scientific committee has been working very, very, very hard to make sure that it is actually up to the standard. Now, the delay that we had in doing some of the judgment and peer reviewing and all that, it's all because everybody was so busy and everybody was so involved in a number of things. I stop here and would like to ask my colleagues, Paula and Philippe, to take over as SPC and being in charge of the scientific program. Paula and Philippe, back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Najib, and thanks for the excellent introduction to our conference, emphasising the powerful theme that we've selected for this year, which certainly is come home to us all, hasn't it? How we are all one world affected by health and the opposite. So Paula and I are not going to detain you with long speeches, but we just wanted to welcome everybody and thank everybody again who's been involved. So Paula and I would like to thank Najib himself as our Vice President for MedInfo, especially Elaine as our helper at every stage of the process at all hours of the day and night, as we struggled across our multiple time zones that Najib was describing. So Elaine's been a marvelous help to us. It wouldn't have happened without her. Also, Sabine as our president has given us great support and helped us along when we've had difficult moments in the process. And especially as an SPC, we'd like to thank those who were our track chairs, who led the peer review process in detail, and of course all the many, many peer reviewers who've contributed to the quality of the submissions and the quality of the proceedings. So let me hand over to Paula to add her words of welcome.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you, Najib, for this warm introduction. I just want to remember when we started the MedInfo, it was supposed to be in person in Sydney, and we started working. And at that time, we thought we were going to do it in person, but the pandemic changed plans. And I'm really thankful that we were able to set up this meeting with the help of Sabine, of Najib, the great help and support. And she was the one that made it happen, that is Elaine, and also Philip. So I'm just thankful to everyone that that we are able to be here right now having MedInfo, and MedInfo was able to be done although we have a pandemic going on. So I guess that we can learn a lot from that we as a group can work really well and overcome any challenge that might come up. So I'm just glad to be here with all of you.
Thanks, Paula. So I think without any further delay, we'd now like to introduce Sabine as our president of IMIA to give us her personal welcome to the conference. Sabine.
Thank you, Paula and Philip, and also Najib, of course. Dear colleagues and friends, I have the honor to welcome you on behalf of IMIA to this, which is a very different and the first online MedInfo for us. And as the IMIA mission is to bring people together from around the world, to advance science, education, and practice, we usually use our MedInfos beside our working groups in order to practice this through mutual learning and exchange of knowledge and skills and ideas. And as the past 2 years have been quite different in this regard, with very few opportunities to meet and to learn from each other in the way we are used to, most of us have not met in real life during these 2 years. And unfortunately, we also have lost some IMIA colleagues that we used to meet at our gatherings during this time. And I would like us first to just take a minute of remembrance for some of the colleagues that we lost. So thank you for this silent minute. And for this special version of the online MedInfo that we have now, our aim was really to, when we had to switch from a physical one, was to enable broad participation, to allow our authors to spread their results in the PubMed index publications as we are used to, and not least to make this conference affordable for all. And that's why we selected a few live panels. We give you access to all the recorded presentations, to openly accessible proceedings, and not least to free access to this conference. And I really hope that we, by this, can achieve this broad participation and that you all get lots of inspiration from this conference. And one person that I personally really got inspired by as a student myself, that is this year's recipient of the IMIA François Grémy Award of Excellence, Dr. Ted Shortleff, who is a real pioneer and leader in medical informatics research and education. He is Chair Emeritus and Adjunct Professor in Biomedical Informatics at Columbia University, and he's also Adjunct Professor of Biomedical Informatics at Arizona State University and Adjunct Professor of Population Health Sciences at Weill Cornell Medical College. And he has held many academic appointments and served in different leadership roles. So he is well known as a pioneer in the development of applications of artificial intelligence in medicine, including the first expert system MySyn. I still own your book, Ted. And he's of course known for his textbooks of biomedical informatics that are used in education worldwide. And I think it's really about time, and it's a great honor for IMIA to present him with this award. And we will now have the pleasure to listen to his talk about science of informatics where he will tell us a little bit about his personal experiences in the field. I would like to ask you to post your questions in the Q&A, and we will have a Q&A session with Dr. Shortleff then after his talk. And we try to answer as many questions as you may have. And with this and my heartfelt congratulations, I would like to hand over to you, Ted.
Well, thanks very much for the very nice introduction, and obviously for this wonderful recognition in honor of Francois Grémy. I'll be saying a few words about him in my comments. And thanks to all of you who are involved in putting together the meeting. It's wonderful we have the technology today to allow this to happen at a time of international challenges with health that prevent us from traveling. And I think about how hard this last 2 years would have been without computing and communications technology, which have allowed so much to continue in spite of the travel restrictions and the like. So I'm happy to be able to participate in this meeting, even though it's not in Sydney, and look forward to seeing everyone in Sydney in 2 years. So thank you so much for that. I did prepare some remarks. I'm not going to use any slides. I decided that this is the kind of talk where maybe we should just communicate in a somewhat less formal way. I'm going to try to give you some personal philosophy and explain how it's evolved and developed in the context of my own experiences in the field over the years. I'd like to try to turn that into some take-home lessons for everyone to consider. They may be more relevant to some of you than to others, but ultimately I think they have a lot to do with the field and it's how it's developed and how it can evolve. And just as a kind of prelude to the actual content, I just want to say that I think one of the lessons, if you will, and an early determination in my own life and career was follow your instincts, even if they seem to be very unusual. Having a fire in the belly for something is not always accomplished by everybody, but reaching a point where you say, I don't know where it's going to go, I don't know how it will be welcomed, but it just sounds like a great fun topic and area, and I wanted to be part of it. And that was at a time when there were very few people thinking that way, but I've never regretted it. And I'll try to tell you what I've tried to do with the opportunities that have been offered to me along the way, and how that has influenced my thinking. I discovered the field quite by accident. It was very serendipitous. It was in the late 1960s. I was an undergraduate in college in Boston, and I remember in the US system, we go to university before we go to medical school. They're separate. And so I was planning to go to medical school after I finished my university years. And I was an applied mathematics major, even though I was pre-med. And in that context, discovered for the first time, I'd never seen one really until I got to college, computers and computer science. And I was immediately taken by the field and by the potential of computers and the intellectual challenges associated with computing. And I went through a kind of identity crisis. Gee, I thought I was going to go to medical school, but I really like this too. And fortunately, I had an advisor in my college who said, you know, there's a laboratory of computer science across the river in Boston, in the hospital, the Massachusetts General Hospital. And so maybe you should go over there and see if you can't do both. Okay, and, you know, as they say, the rest is history. That was a turning point for me. I did go to MGH. I met Octo Barnett, who ran that lab. All of you know of Octo, who just passed away a few years ago, but throughout my career has been a key friend and mentor. He made me prove I could program. He gave me a mumps programming challenge, which I must have done all right with, because then he agreed to bring me on as a research programmer on a part-time basis while I was a student, and assigned me to work with a physician who was working on his own PhD, having just finished medical school, and that was Bob Greenis. So I was Bob Greenis's programmer while he was doing his PhD at Mass General. So that's 50 some odd years ago. And Bob Greenis and I today are still close colleagues, having worked together on papers and the like over all those 50 years. It's just fascinating that you can be that tied to a couple of people as I was to Octo and Bob throughout my career. So they helped me decide this was a field that I could do, but I needed to find a medical school that thought it was a good idea. And in those days, for a physician to seek, or a medical student to seek to get some computer science training while they were in medical school was a pretty odd thought. And I had to try to figure out what medical schools might make that possible. And I found that of those that which I was accepted, Stanford's medical school in California seemed to be the most flexible and had opportunities for designing your own programs while you were a medical student. And it was all on one campus and easy to move between computer science and the medical school. And soon after my arrival, as I began to pursue this possibility, I was met and then mentored by some really great scientists. And the focus of my talk today is really about the science in our field. And there's no doubt that these folks had a lot to do with the way I approached informatics as a graduate student. One was Joshua Lederberg, an amazing, brilliant man who had come to Stanford at age 34, having just received the Nobel Prize in Medicine from, when he was at the University of Wisconsin. He was chair of genetics at Stanford. And he believed in computing, and in fact became a leader and has received one of the Maury Collin Awards for his contributions in informatics as well. But he was fundamentally a geneticist. And another geneticist, a physician who succeeded Josh Lederberg as chair of genetics at Stanford was Stanley Cohen. And he was my PhD dissertation advisor after I got a PhD program organized, as I'll be describing. But across in the engineering school was Bruce Buchanan, a philosopher of science, computer scientist, who again, like Bob Greenis and Octo Barnett, has been a colleague and close friend throughout my career, and who had a lot to do with the work that I did as a graduate student. So it took me 6 years to do the 2 degrees. I certainly still wanted to be a practicing physician, but I discovered, and I had not discovered as an undergraduate, the field of artificial intelligence while I was at Stanford, and began to see the potential of AI in medicine. I was interested in a specific clinical problem, which was selecting antimicrobial therapy for individuals who were very sick, but you did not yet have the full culture results, and therefore had to use a lot of clinical acumen to decide how at least to begin their antimicrobial therapy. But that problem, because it required understanding what was going on in the heads of clinicians, led me to really get interested in representing knowledge and reasoning processes, and in turn led me to develop some methods that, once I had published them, began to be widely adopted and built upon, even outside of medicine. So I'll come back to that, because that really is that kind of key lesson of the presentation. I completed my clinical training, went back to Boston for a year, finished up at Stanford, and then was asked to join the faculty in the Department of Medicine at Stanford. This was in 1979. I was a general internist. I'd done general internal medicine residency, did not do a clinical fellowship, but I was also appointed in the computer science department based on the work I'd done as a graduate student. So you can think back on your career, and sometimes it's just this one event or one conversation that you remember. There was he wasn't really a formal advisor. He was another faculty member in medicine. He asked me to come by one day, and I sat down with him, and he said, you're starting out as a faculty member in a very rigorous medical school that's very oriented towards wet bench laboratory research and the like. And as an assistant professor of medicine, you're different from the other people here. And if you want to succeed here, if you want to get promoted and become an associate and a full professor and be eligible for tenure and those kind of things, you have to make it clear to your colleagues that you're a scientist. Now, this seemed in some sense obvious to me, but I've never heard it stated quite so explicitly. And it happened in the context of some interesting debates that were going on at the time about whether science and engineering were fundamentally different, and engineering wasn't science and science was science. And it had always seemed to me that you could be in an engineering discipline and do it very scientifically, and that this distinction was artificial. So that became kind of part of my mindset at the time, partly because, of course, I wanted to have peer respect from other clinicians and physicians who were also researchers and often had laboratories. Now, it turned out that once I was on the faculty, I kept being approached by people who said, I want to do what you're doing. How do you do that? How can I get that kind of education at the intersection of medicine and computing? And I was fortunate, again, because of the flexibility of Stanford in putting together an interdisciplinary degree program with approval of the university to offer master's and PhD degrees in what at the time we called medical information sciences. And the medical informatics term hadn't existed, and I called my own degree medical information sciences, although today we would certainly not use that phrase. And by the mid-1980s, our unit was known as the Section on Medical Informatics within the Department of Medicine at Stanford. This was a unit that was dedicated to the proposition that you should find the science in what you do, even when the work is, and almost always is, driven by application goals. And that if you're going to get a degree in biomedical informatics, you can make application contributions, and those may be very valuable, but you have to make biomedical informatics contributions as well. And you have to write about both. So ask yourself, what am I contributing to the field of biomedical informatics? Not just what's exciting about this thing I built that's having some kind of impact or promise in the field of medicine. The implication is you have to innovate, and you have to define what's novel about what you did and why it was necessary to innovate in the way you did. What was it about the problem that forced you to innovate in the way you did? So I began to believe and convey to students that methodology, new methods, is at the core of the science of biomedical informatics, and that they always should be asking on their own projects, what is new in what I'm doing? Why did I develop it the way I did? How do my insights generalize for potential use by others? What's the range of applicability? What can you define the set of problems for which this approach might be valuable? And ultimately then, how do you demonstrate the value and validity of what you've done? This is the notion of evaluation that goes well beyond just showing that, for example, a decision support program gets things right. It also has to be usable. It has to adapt to workflow. It has to have all those other characteristics that would be necessary for it to be truly successful and impactful. Now, I found that the students that came into the program almost always came because they were interested in the applications. I mean, that's what excited people about medical informatics, right? They wanted to build something that would really help doctors or patients or nurses or public health workers or whatever. And they were too often quick to ignore the underlying shareable science that they might have to develop as part of working on such problems. And so we needed to make it very explicit. What's new? Can you suggest other settings in which what you've done could be adopted or adapted and improved? So that meant writing, and writing well. and avoiding just describing the application, even though that might have been very exciting. What was it about the problem that defied the existing approaches and drove your innovation? So this thinking led me actually in about 1983, shortly after we got this program going, to give a keynote address at a meeting that was held actually in Chamonix in France, and resulted in a book called Meeting the Challenge, Informatics and Medical Education. Francois Grémy, who I met at that meeting, I'd met him actually earlier as well, was one of the editors of that book. And my talk was called The Science of Biomedical Computing. Sounds a little bit like what I'm talking about today. And in fact, many of the points that I'm making today kind of are buried in there in some way. Obviously, that's 40 years ago. I think my thinking has evolved a bit since then, but largely that was the nidus of many of these same ideas. I had met Grémy actually in 1974 at the very first MedInfo in Stockholm, when EMEA was still called TC4 in IFIP, and had attended as many as I could, even while I was training. And that continues to this day. I try to go to all of them if I possibly can. And subsequently, I had many chances to meet Dr. Grémy, have an occasional meal with him, and took me to nice places in France where he showed how his love not only for informatics, but for fine food and wine as well. Well, this notion of the science in medical computing became one of the mantras in our informatics unit at Stanford. And then I began to realize as the 1980s went on, it was hard to teach this material using just articles from from scientific journals, informatics papers. We needed a textbook, something that really could convey, especially the concepts, the stuff that was likely to continue to be true way beyond the current technology and you know, the limitations that existed at that time. Remember, in the 1980s, we just began to have PCs. Networking was not well established. We didn't have EHRs. So you were inherently constrained by what you could really do in an applied setting under those circumstances, but you could imagine where we were headed, and you could certainly do the methodologic work to keep us pointed in that direction. So starting in around 1985, we put together plans for a textbook. That textbook took 5 years to write. It came out in 1990, and that was the first edition. And as Sabine was mentioning, we had multiple editions after that. It's always needing to be updated, even though the concepts may not change as much as the applications and some of the detailed methods. A lot changes, and the book has gotten very big, and the new edition just came out this summer. So that's the 5th edition of this book, which has been refreshed about every 8 years between 1990 and now. Well, I've also had this set of concerns about the scope of our field and how it's named. I've already mentioned that the evolution of the name of the field, medical information science, is kind of made up. We actually had called it medical computer science at Stanford before I had a degree program. And then medical informatics, which became embraced by the 1980s globally as the name for the field. Then we had an amazing decade in the 1990s during which the Human Genome Project occurred. Everybody in basic biology began to realize you couldn't be a life scientist anymore without computers. Suddenly there was this new field that seemed to be evolving, and yet it was using many of the same methods that had been developed in the medical informatics world. I'm of course referring to bioinformatics, and it basically emerged during the 1990s. But it seemed to me always that we were joined at the hip. I mean, there was this continuum between what was happening in the basic biology lab and what was happening in the basic life science human biology lab, and what was happening in the clinical world and even in public health. And that these fields should not develop separately, but should develop linked in some way with those transitions well recognized. I think this has been borne out by the importance today of precision medicine and the like, which basically is neither genomics or clinical care, but both, right? So the name of the field began to evolve, and we began to call it biomedical informatics in order to try to bring the bio end of the spectrum in under that umbrella. You know, we also were able to show that this field, you know, people said, is it really a separate discipline? It just seems to be a lot of computer science and statistics, and mathematics, you know, cognitive science, and human-computer interaction kind of questions, that kind of thing. And those all exist already. But I began to argue, wait a minute, it's just different when you bring them all together in a complex environment like clinical care or biology, where we don't have really clear models of how things work. And that it really was kind of its own field. Certainly we could show that the field have developed methods that had not emerged in those other disciplines and then fed them back into those disciplines, so that biomedical informatics was making contributions to computer science and data science and statistics and psychology and the like. Well, today I know that the public health community has been concerned that biomedical doesn't seem to embrace them. I worry about trying to change the name any further because if you keep changing the name of the field, it confuses people that are in it, but certainly any people that are not working in it. So we hear now biomedical and health informatics, putting health into it, but my view is that health is, and public health is an application domain of this fundamental discipline of biomedical informatics. And so I have stuck with the BMI name. In fact, in about 2000, I was asked to give my opinions about a somewhat struggling journal that had been one of the major journals in our field, Computers and Biomedical Research. It was started by Academic Press and Homer Warner in 1967, had a big impact in medicine, I mean, in our field. Homer stepped down in 1993. Al Pryor from the University of Utah took over, but JMIA was getting started. There were growing journals in informatics in other parts of the world, methods, of course, in Europe, especially, and others as well. So when they asked me about it, and I gave them a pretty negative feeling about what had happened with computers and biomedical research as it lost its influence, at least in the informatics community. It was publishing a lot of very good signal processing and imaging papers, but it was not doing the core informatics quite the same as it had once. They asked me if I would take it over, and I said, well, look, if I'm going to take it over, and I'm interested in doing that, but it can't be just a competitor to the other journals. It has to have its own unique niche. And it won't surprise you that I said that unique niche had to be about methodology, about the science of the field, and not about applications. There were other journals that would publish applications papers. So we started the Journal of Biomedical Informatics in 2001, explicitly as a journal to try to promote this notion of the science of informatics and the methodological core, which was shareable and needed to be written about more consistently in the literature. We wanted to teach authors to look for and write about what's novel and generalizable in their work. And became aware during those years and reading many, many papers that were submitted to the journal. It started out as a quarterly, it's now a monthly, and has been very successful. I stepped down last year as editor after 20 years, and Moore Peleg is now the editor of this journal. But I found that it was too frequent that people were, students in particular, but oftentimes experienced researchers too, were not looking back to the roots of our field. When a PubMed search for 4 years, when the core of our field is methodology, methods that struggled 20 years ago or 25 years ago, insights that were perhaps really important, but had difficulty being well expressed and formulated in actual applications because of the constraints of the technology that was available. That those need to be resurrected. We need to look to them and see to what extent they help address the problems of today. I'll give you an example because it's one that's very close to my heart, and that is in the 70s and 80s, and especially in the AI community, there was this notion that the power of what we were doing was in encoding knowledge. Knowledge is power was a frequently used phrase. We need to encode the knowledge of these complex medical fields, biomedical fields, and develop methods for properly reasoning using that knowledge in order to actually simulate expert performance. So, I mean, a lot of work went on in that area, both inside and outside of biomedicine, and the whole expert systems phenomenon of that era was based on that concept. So I don't have time today to talk about it, but it would be an interesting conversation why expert systems as a methodology fell into disfavor. You've all heard of AI winter, and there was an AI winter in the late 80s, early 90s that sort of led to a disaffection with artificial intelligence. Kind of ironic when we look at the way AI is being touted today in the world of medicine and computing in general. So we could come back to that, but I just point out that today, I've actually heard one respected scientist refer to a new model developed by a machine learning program that can be applied in order to analyze a new set of data as new knowledge. And I beg to differ with the notion that that's knowledge. That's an analytical, mathematical solution to a problem. And the whole field of explainability now in AI, in this world of machine learning, keeps looking to the problems and trying to get insight into how a machine learning program actually does what it does at the human level, in the human, in a way that's relevant to the human brain. So big topic, we could talk more about it, but I really believe we need to look for a resurgence of interest in knowledge, representation, and use, even in the context of machine learning, and look for more intelligent merging of these methodologies in order to make machine learning tools much more acceptable and useful in the world of biomedicine. And just close with one other example, and this has to do with the evolution of our meetings. Especially, let me use AMIA for this purpose, because at AMIA, the membership has grown, and there's much more of a non-academic component now to AMIA than there used to be. And I worried about the loss of that academic core, which in fact was how AMIA got started. Not that we don't want that applied piece, but we can't lose that scientific, more academic core. So I wrote a paper for PhD students that was published in JAMIA on how to write a doctoral dissertation in biomedical informatics. It kind of reflects some of the points that I'm making today. And then a year after that, we created something called the Doctoral Dissertation Award, which is actually available to doctoral students in informatics worldwide. Anybody can have their dissertation nominated for this award. And we've now for 5 years tried to select the best dissertations that have been nominated that really do capture this notion of the underlying methodologic science in our field and demonstrate it. And they've been wonderful dissertations. They're all available for download on the AMIA website, and you could look up the Doctoral Dissertation Award there and get a feel for the kind of dissertations that have been honored in this way through that award. So I know I run a little over, I got more wordy, but Sabine, I am going to finish now. There are some lessons of all this. I just want to reiterate a few of them. You know, application goals drive our field, but the solutions often require novel methodology and novel science. And we have to not underestimate in every effort the amount of generalizable novelty that may be embedded in the work. We have to ask ourselves, what did I do that's really different and shareable to others? And that's what we need to write about. Now, the applied work that uses these standard methods that do get published is also crucial. That's why we do this. Ultimately, the world of biomedicine is going to benefit when novelty becomes reproducible and standardized. and allows industrial strength solutions that can themselves support a growing marketplace for informatics products. But I still believe that students in this field need to be taught to think about that, what's generalizable and shareable in what they do, and think beyond the application itself that motivated their work. There almost always is something they can share. And we have to insist that it's identified and shared in writing, even if the student anticipates a subsequent career in applied informatics or industry. Okay. Well, I think I've conveyed my love for this field and my pleasure at having discovered it when I did and been able to find a way to stay involved for as many years as I have. And I also have a love for the students whom I've had an opportunity to mentor, and even those that I haven't known personally, but who've at least benefited from the books and articles and that kind of thing. So I recognize I've had a lot of good fortune in this field and a lot of serendipity that's led me in new and novel ways, and new directions throughout. I haven't just stayed in one institution my whole time, and I've tried different kinds of work. And ran AMIA for a while as president for 3 years. But throughout it all, I maintained a deep belief in the importance of biomedical informatics, its accomplishments, and its ongoing promise for the future. And I look to all of you to carry that future forward in an effective way. So thank you, Sabine. Sorry if I ran over a little bit, but I appreciate the opportunity.
No problem at all. Thank you, Ted. And I think everybody greatly appreciated your reflections, and we on purpose cut ourselves short, I can say, because we wanted really to use this time to hear your reasoning and to have also some time for questions. And I will just check here before I put my ein. Could you please introduce something about MedInfo industry? But it's not completely clear to me what is meant, if this person means the industrial development in health IT.
You mean just what's the state of the industry? Is that kind of the gist of the question?
It just said, could you please introduce something about MedInfo industry?
The medical informatics industry. Well, look, right now, the investment in new companies that are oriented towards computers and digital technologies in medicine, mHealth and the like, dominate in the investment community. It's a huge area. And there are many, many opportunities, not only to get employed in the industry, but to start new companies. And there are investors that believe this is a very ripe area for further investment. So that was not true earlier on, I assure you. This is very much a recent phenomenon in the last few years. And it's largely been because of the growing interest of some of the biggest tech companies in healthcare as an application domain. You've seen, Google trying big involvement by Microsoft and talk at Facebook about a more medically oriented components there. And the growth of Watson Health by IBM, for example, as a spinoff. So I just want to point out there are even big companies very involved, but lots of startups. And so I think if people are wondering if there's a future in this field for those that don't want to go into academia and want to work in companies, I would say definitely yes.
I saw in the chat that several people said that they are PhD students. They really appreciated it because I think it makes them reflect upon their work now in finishing up and see what is my contribution, right? But I would like to ask you in this respect also, which areas do you think, you mentioned knowledge representation, as there we are still far from human mimicking, but other areas of biomedical informatics where you see great potential?
Well, again, I think that the opportunities are very broad. I picked that one because it happened to be the area that I had worked in personally and saw being a little bit underrepresented in current efforts. But there are other areas that continue. I mean, I would say the important thing to remember about where we are in 2021 is that it's on a trajectory. It's not the end of the line. And there are clearly significant limitations in the machine learning of today, for example. We know a lot about the concerns about biased data sets and how those can disrupt the accuracy or provide biasing in the way in which machine learning programs perform on new cases, for example. Our field has always struggled with the challenges of interoperability and standardization, data sharing across different vendors and different countries, and yet there's so much to be gained by getting that right over time. So those are areas. I see other areas that we're still doing now, but they still have loads of future work that are important and will make us even better. Natural language processing. I mean, NLP has never stopped. We were working on NLP back then, and now still, obviously, with impressive natural language and speech understanding now, which was much more limited 30, 40 years ago, although there was work in speech understanding that led to today's systems. But there's still much to do in NLP. So, I mean, it seems to me that, and look, I could think much more broadly about it, I suppose, almost any area. There's very little that I would say we shouldn't work on anymore, because almost always the question to ask is, if I take something that seemed to have kind of stopped being worked on 10 years ago, why? And be careful about believing what you read. Okay, I've you mentioned that I did this work on mice, and it did have an impact by getting expert systems very involved. But I've read articles that say ultimately mice failed because it was not used extensively by physicians in practice. Okay, that's a very limited understanding of what the world was like in 1976 when I finished my dissertation and published it. Okay, the world has changed dramatically since then. Right back then, you had to actually answer a whole bunch of questions to run a case. Now, most of those answers would be taken straight out of the EHR. Okay, so the world has evolved in ways that mean that some of the ideas that people think were unsuccessful were only unsuccessful because of the reality of the surrounding technology and the like, and that attitudes have changed. And technology has changed, networking has changed. Some of the barriers are the same now as they were then. All this business about standards development and standardization, it's much better than it was, but we still have major problems with merged data sets in a world where that is a problem. So I'm not going to say anybody who's working in Bayesian systems, stop. I'm not going to say that, because I think these all have great potential and have demonstrated it, and they are tools that can be used, adapted, and perhaps improved in ways that will make them even more pertinent going forward.
Ted, I have about 8 questions here in the
Okay, I'll try not to be so
Q&A, so
wordy.
I try to get some through. Some of those are a bit about the gap between research and implementation. What can we do about it? Is there enough evaluation? Is one question. And another one is, do we need to bring medical doctors better on board in order to close the gap?
Mm-hmm. Two somewhat different questions. Let me just answer the second one very quickly first. The notion that we need to get medical doctors today more on board is, it's still very true. It's been true for a long time, but I must say medical doctors are much more attuned to the promise of this kind of technology than they were 10, 20, 30 years ago, for sure. And there's a whole organization in the AI area called AI Med, maybe some of you have heard of that, which is very oriented towards clinicians and training them in areas like data science and machine learning so that they can actually make them part of the tools that the clinician uses with their own data and that kind of thing. So, you know, I think it's aimed.io or something like that. You could check that out and see what they're up to. Let me see, the first question was, remind me.
About regarding evaluation, if there is
evaluation.
enough evaluation being done.
So I referred to this. I said there's a tendency for us in healthcare computing to evaluate, in decision support in particular, to evaluate a system totally by the accuracy of a program on its decision-making task. Okay, and I think this is a very short-sighted view of what it takes to truly evaluate a system. I think we can look to the pharma industry for both counterexamples and examples. The pharma industry knows that regardless of what the FDA does, or to make the FDA do what it does, they have to publish rigorous studies in clinical journals on new meds. Okay, and there's a whole science of clinical trials that's evolved because of that, and they collaborate with academic groups in order to do those studies often, or with practitioners. And it gets published, and it's kind of the coin of the realm. That's what you have to do if you want to get your drug approved, right? In healthcare computing in general, we tend to focus on that kind of a demonstration only at the level of actual performance on the task at hand. And we don't do the formal evaluations necessary to show the actual impact on patients, cost effectiveness, acceptability, human-computer interaction issues, all that kind of stuff. And I think there's a staged evaluation process that we need to be doing for all of our systems, and those need to be written up step by step. But until you get to the end of that, you can't say that it's worth using a machine learning program just because it properly identifies lung nodules. The question is, how do you integrate that into a practice environment? Can you show that it would work there? Is it worth it? What would it cost? Is it so much better that it's worth the extra expense that's involved in implementing it? These are all questions that the world is going to demand that we answer well. And I don't think we've been doing it as well as we should. That includes the companies, by the way, not just the academics. In fact, it's maybe more of an issue for the companies.
Okay, I pick one last question, and perhaps you have some time to go through the Q&A. Ted, you could type some answers then, if you'd like, if I may grab you here. One question, one last, could you please give some comments on interpretable AI, especially about the gap between lab and clinical practice?
Between lab and
clinical practice, I guess. I mean, if the interpretability of the algorithm, or later the interpretability towards the user, I guess.
That's what I was referring to when I talked about explainability. Okay.
Yeah.
Those of you who know the early MISA work, you'll know that one of the things we did was say, docs aren't going to use this if you don't explain the basis for any advice that we give. That's crucial. And so a lot of work went into using that knowledge representation, not only to make decisions, but to be able to explain in terms that a doctor could understand why this computer program thought that that's the antibiotic they should read, why they were asking a given question, why this piece of data was important, how are you going to use this if I answer it for you. That kind of explanation is essentially unheard of in today's machine learning applications. Okay? And I think that the main impact of those programs, especially when they are designed for direct interaction with physicians, will depend upon that being fixed. And I'm sorry, but telling the physician which nodes are lighting up for this case in a neural net is not going to convince them. They want human type explanations of that kind of phenomenon. And we have to figure out how to bring some of this former work on explanation and interpretation and why into the way in which we deliver systems for clinicians today.
Okay, thank you, Ted. Thank you so much. This was wonderful. And we close with your part now, and I hand over to Paula, who will continue with our panel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much, Ted. I'm sorry that we have to cut you short because we have the next session coming up, but we have the questions and we will be glad if you can answer them, and later we can publish your answers on the website that is possible.
I'll try to do that.
Thank you very much. So continuing with the session, let me just share my screen. I would like, let me just, there we go. So as you can see, we are currently in the COVID pandemic, but luckily in the near future, COVID might be over and we have to get used to this new reality. That's how we call this session the post-COVID-19 recovery. And we were really interested in having representatives from different governments telling us, what do you think that informatics helped during COVID? What is the digital health perspective before COVID, during and after COVID, and all regarding the current situation we have with certifications and vaccine passports and how they are planning to to take into account that. We have Dr. Daniel Ferrante. He's Vice Minister of Health of the City of Buenos Aires, and he's also Undersecretary of Health Planning and Network Management, and he will be talking to us about what they are doing at the City of Buenos Aires from the Ministry of Health. After his presentation, Dr. Philip G. Chinlo, he is Deputy Director General for the Centers of Disease Control of the Ministry of Health and Welfare of the Republic of China in Taiwan. So I will stop sharing my screen and I will ask Dr. Ferrante to start with his presentation. Please remember that all your questions need to be posted on the Q&A section so that we can make the questions right after both presentations. Thank you very much. Daniel, please.
Well, thank you, Paula. Good morning or good afternoon, whatever applies to everyone. Thank you for the invitation. Firstly, Fernán Quiroz was the person invited here. He's now currently, you all know him for his strong background in medical informatics. Now currently he's the Ministry of Health, Buenos Aires City, and I'm his Deputy Minister. So I start sharing my presentation. Well, first of all, in these 15 minutes and only 5 slides, I would like to share 3 main topics. First of all, very briefly, where we were standing in terms of not only the health environment in Buenos Aires City will be very long, but particularly at what stage we managed to go forward on the digital agenda, health digital agenda, particularly on the public health sector in Buenos Aires City. So Buenos Aires is a 3 million citizen city. It's the capital of Argentina. The metropolitan area comprises 14 million people, and every day almost 3 or more million citizens coming inside the city to seek for services, work, and even seek for health. So our really denominator is nearly 6 or 7 million people seeking for health in our 117 healthcare centers, which comprise 34 hospitals and the remaining primary healthcare centers. And we managed until the end of 2019 to open 4 million electronic health records, which I will describe briefly. So by beginning of 2020, when all of us couldn't have imagined the pandemic we are going through now, we managed to implement health information systems in 50 primary healthcare centers, which are all of them around the territory of the city of Buenos Aires, and 20 hospitals, mainly general hospitals, acute general hospitals, and pediatric hospitals. We started with the implementation of the electronic health record itself, but also visit scheduling, integration with laboratory. Of course, we have not finished, but started by that date, and also integration with pharmacies, and also all the networking between different providers, specifically dealing with public health sector. We faced a lot of challenges. First of all, technical and infrastructural, because we had to invest a lot of resources in terms of connecting or PCs. But our main barrier, as you all know, and as medical informatics professionals, but also for any big transformation in a complex and adaptive system like health, is the cultural barriers, and also a very strong status quo, particularly not only in the health sector, but in the public health sector in developing countries, which adds another layer of status quo and barriers. The results of this effect of different forces were and still might be difficult access for populations to seek for care, particularly Buenos Aires City and metro area. We provide services for deprived population, which even have more barriers to access. So we also the information systems, the health information systems, we started to implement along with an implementation of an overall health plan, which the vision was to implement an integrated healthcare network, starting with the primary care, where the access to the whole health sector started, organizing the healthcare upstream, and also assigning defined population denominators and city areas to every of the 50 primary healthcare centers. You might imagine that the health information systems were key in setting the structure and the main processes of this overall health plan. But now at Buenos Aires and overall Argentina in March 2020, a couple of months after you started your pandemic in the northern hemisphere, everything changed for our plan. Our period now we are in the mid of the governmental period of 4 years, now in the second year, starting the third next December. So we really had to adapt very quickly to cope with not only on information system, but everything had to be adapted, even ourselves in our individual lives and family lives. But moreover, the overall health sector had to adapt to cope with the increasing demand of COVID services, but also the decreased demands or other services and adaptation that had to be done on the fly. So during the pandemic, we had to go in an accelerated transformation to telemedicine, telehealth, or online care. First, it was not planned. We had that in the agenda, but really the COVID pandemic really speeded up that, particularly firstly, replacing the usual care, particularly ambulatory care, because mostly of the health care human resources were devoted to acute care and intensive care and active case funding in the community. So routine ambulatory care was really readapted or diminished and suffered from the lockdown. So mostly even 30 or 40% of the volume of the offer of the ambulatory care migrated to online care. Also, we were struggling some years before on digital prescription implementation. Pharmacists and other professionals were quite reluctant to implementation, but more because of the urgent need to continue prescribing essential drugs and medications. We started, and really national regulation was helpful on that. We started implementation of digital prescription. A particularly note is the implementation of chatbots. The Buenos Aires city government had, or now has also, a chatbot for basic services like appointments to different documentation or like driving licenses, and so on and so forth. But we adopted that for health. At the beginning, we only started to provide a follow-up for close contacts, follow-up for confirmed COVID cases that needed isolation. Progressively, we started a more proactive use of the chatbot, for example, like follow-up of symptoms, retrieval of test results, either an antigen test or PCRs. And now, the last few months, when we started very strong with the vaccination campaign, almost everyone is receiving their appointment for the vaccination through the chatbot, or either by push messaging or on the dialogue with the bot. We really had million and million, or I don't have the strict numbers here, of interactions on the bot, and really we are strongly planning, but that's the last slide, on continuing deepening on this strategy. Also, we implemented a very strong COVID monitoring, either confirmed cases, we need isolation at home, or either close contacts, integrated with active case funding on the field, at field epidemiology. So we started to integrate somehow isolated silos we had between epidemiology and information systems, probably because more of the urgency or the emergency, but nevertheless we started to integrate those kind of thinking models on a mainstream of data management. Also, access to lab results, regarding, as Paula was saying, on passport and vaccination. On the last few months, we've started to provide certification of negative tests, and also of completed vaccination schemes for different needs, for example, traveling or access. You know that soccer in Argentina is very, very important for us. So even this very weekend, we are starting with the matches with public, and the public need to bring their passport to access to the match. Also integrated with national health system, we have a national report system, and also we started a very strong initiative on open data, which will also continue. So everyone, every citizen, every journalist, researcher, whatever, can access, you even can access to our open data tools to see aggregated data of the city of Buenos Aires, and also download microdata, of course, keeping confidentiality. So last but not least, I would like to, only 2 minutes that I have left, with some lesson learned about that, about what we were dealing in the pandemic. Hopefully, we think that the worst stages of the pandemic are over. Probably this kind of wishful thinking, and also in spite of all the suffering, not only our health system, health professionals, the community in terms of health, disease, or people that left, that are gone. They were also suffering from social, emotional, and economical aspects. Particularly, Argentina had a very strong economical crisis right now, in terms of aggravated by the pandemic. And there are strong lessons for our, not only for medical informatics or health information system, but also for the health sector in general, in particular for your community also. No? Now, more than ever, we learned that we put the patient first, and every development, not only in terms of software or chatbots, but even appointments or even services altogether, we put everything back in the bench to redesign, and every time we felt, and even the patients or the community made us feel that we are not doing a good work in terms of not focusing on that. We know we all agree in concept, but really it was one of the few times, particularly in my professional life, that the main focus was on the patients. Secondly, in terms of interoperability, of course, you understand interoperability in terms of semantical or syntactical, but I will add in a game of words, human interoperability and cooperation. Without cooperation, not only within the public sector, with other areas of the government, with the users, the end users, and also with the private sector, we could not have managed the pandemic, and results might have been even worse we have been seeing. Thirdly, access to information, not only at public level to really show everybody at the community or the press or anyone all the information in terms of an open access policy, but also beginning at micro level or case management level, at middle managers, but also at strategic level, information was key. And every day we were heavy users of boards or indicators to make decisions on the fly that were needed in an unprecedented pandemic, I think in everyone here in this room. So to finalize, I would like to thank again. We feel that we can't forget these lessons. These lessons exceed the scope of the information systems, but the push that the pandemic gave to digital transformation need to be gathered and need to be pushed even more. And again, everything contributes to our main purpose, that is giving a very best, better services to our community. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Daniel, for this great presentation. I guess that you were able to summarize all what the city of Buenos Aires has been doing previous to the pandemic, and how you have to, change lanes like really fast. So thank you very much. Now I will ask Dr. Philip Gitin-Lo to share his screen and start with his presentation. And please remember that after both presentations, we will have the Q&A part.
Hi, good afternoon, good evening, good morning. Let me try to share my my slides. Sorry, but I think I encountered some difficulty here.
Do you want us to share the slides for you?
Yes, if you can.
Yes, just let me set that up. So I have it here. So you just let me know when you want to. Let me just share my screen. And I guess that we have to do it like this.
Okay.
So
Problem.
please go ahead.
So thank you very much once again for the invitation. I'm speaking as a CDC official in Taiwan. I'm not an IT specialist, but I want to share with you a few examples that we have been using to combat COVID-19 pandemic in Taiwan since 2020. The next slide, please. If you are not familiar with where Taiwan is, we are a small island country with 23 million population located in West Pacific in East Asia. A few medical info statistics. We have a good medical capacity in Taiwan, about 30 physicians per 10,000 population, 70 hospital beds. Almost 100% of our population are covered by the National Health Insurance, which is key to our pandemic digital information tool because we can use the National Health Insurance database and also their electronic card to connect to other database to help us guide the contact tracing and other quarantine policy using the database linkage methods. Next slide, please. So far, we have about 60,000 COVID-19 cases, including 800 deaths. The goal of our pandemic control is to suppress community transmission. So far, we only had one large community outbreak starting from May this year, ended almost in August this year, resulting in the peak at 700 cases on a daily basis. But since mid-August, we were able to suppress the outbreak into a very low level. Over the past 1 week, we had only 0 to 1 domestic case per day. So we are hoping to see like zero COVID in the next few months. But still, the border entry cases are still many. We keep them in good quarantine system. Another important aspect is to quickly expand our vaccination coverage nationwide. Now we have about almost 60% coverage of the first dose vaccine and reaching 15%, hopefully by the end of this week for the second dose. Next, please. As we are an island country, it's easier for us to do border control using a digitalized quarantine system. On this slide, you can see from border arrival to arrival at their home or designated quarantine hotel. We have used several digital technology to help us. On arrival, every passenger have to fill in this system for entry. There is a QR code that you can scan on your cell phone, or the quarantine official will help you. Immediately when the information is typed in, the system is automatically connected to our civil and the health services. So their system can automatically know that there is someone who is going to be in their jurisdiction for the 14-day quarantine. On arrival to their home or designated hotel, there is an app associated with their smartphone that is installed in the airport. It's a client-based smartphone app for fever and the symptom reporting on a daily basis. It's a mutual way. So if you don't send the message back to the official, then they will track you back using the smartphone. And in addition to active reporting, there's another more official linkage that is linked to the police system that we call the digital fence. When someone is being quarantined in the designated location, their signal of the cell phone is tracked on a daily basis by the police and also civil and health services. If they're out of range of their designated location, then the signal will be tracked by both services, and the police system will be activated to track them down to see where they are. This is to ensure that the person is being quarantined in the right place without getting out of the designated place in order to interfere with the community. Next, please. Although the quarantine system seems perfect, but we still had a community outbreak in mid-May probably introduced by imported case through leakage or breach in quarantine. That community transmission mainly happened in Taipei metro area and lead to our stage 3 restriction from mid-May to end of July, almost 80 days of semi-lockdown in Taiwan. On the photo here, you can see the very busy downtown area of Taipei became empty during the semi-lockdown stage. All the schools nationwide were closed and no restaurant were allowed to have dining. But we still allow people to work. We only encourage them to work from home, but still many on a commuting basis. Through these non-pharmaceutical interventions and also slowly escalation of the vaccine coverage, we're able to control the outbreak to a lower degree and eventually downgraded the restrictions back to stage 2 by the end of July. Next slide, please. During the community outbreak and after the community outbreak, actually we have implemented several other new information technology day-to-day life for our citizens. The mandatory contact tracing tool is now implemented in every single restaurants, convenience stores, or buildings, or public transportation system. That if on entry, you have to use your cell phone, just like the picture on the right-hand side, to scan a QR code. That means you can send a message to our public health system showing that you have been to this area. The cell phone number will be recorded for 28 days. So when there is a confirmed case affiliated with this location, we'll be able to track the contacts using this system. The system is also convenient for our public health official to make a list of the person that have to be tracked and sending the group cell phone message automatically through the system. Next slide, please. Another contact tracing tool is on a voluntary basis. So this is called the Taiwan Social Distancing app. The app is designed by a private sector, but the private sector work hand in hand with Taiwan CDC to encourage users in Taiwan to download the app. And the app is featured by its voluntary basis and also anonymous base. So far, we have more than 6 million people in Taiwan who have downloaded the app already. But only when the person is a confirmed case, then he will be asked whether he wants to or he or she wants to agree that his unique user ID can be uploaded, so his previous contacts can be alerted or notified automatically through the app. However, the government wouldn't be able to know who those contacts are. The idea is that it's on a voluntary and automatic basis. Only people who were alerted will be sent a message on a cell phone to notify their nearest health department. But there's no affiliated punishment associated with that if you don't report or if you don't agree to send your unique ID. So it's on a voluntary basis. But so far, we have about more than 1,000 users who have COVID have chosen to anonymously publish their positive results, which is higher than our expectation. I think a lot of Taiwanese people are willing to help and to cooperate for the good social well-being. Next slide, please. Another everyday informatics is about vaccine booking. About 300,000 doses of the vaccine are being given on a daily basis in Taiwan. And the great majority of these vaccinations were channeled through this website. It's 1922 website. It's designed by our digital minister, Mr. Tang, and his team helped created this vaccination booking platform that can channel all the way from registration to booking and also to to vaccine report of any adverse effect on a smartphone-based app. So using this, people can get onto the website and show their willingness to get a vaccine shot. And then when they are eligible for the vaccine, they will be sent out a text message that they can qualify to be vaccinated. And then they will be linked to another web page showing where and when they can go to which clinic for vaccination. And after being vaccinated, there is another app or QR code they can scan, which will automatically alert them during the next 3 months. If there's any adverse event they want to report, they can just simply use this cell phone-based app to report, and we will be able to collect the information also in a smart way. Next, please. Another tool that is useful also on a daily basis, if you get a vaccination, you probably want to show your vaccine record to someone else. Instead of bringing that paper-based vaccination certificate by yourself, we have developed another useful testing record and vaccination record affiliated with the health insurance app. So anyone who download that National Health Insurance app will have another access to see and also to share their vaccination and the testing records. Just on the right-hand side, you can see that is my own record on the National Health Insurance app. I have got my second dose of COVID-19 vaccine in June this month. And on the even right-hand side, you can see it's AstraZeneca, and even the batch number is shown there. So we can use that as our mobile vaccination record. And also testing result will also be automatically uploaded to this database and shown in this page within 24 hours of testing. So by using this, we have created this a useful way domestically that people can easily show and verify their vaccination testing status with other people. Next, please. But something we have developed, development is a digital health certificate that can possibly be communicated internationally. So many of our IT specialists in the government are working hard to use the standard following EU and WHO's recommendation that adopt the FHIR and also JSON minimum data format to help cover vaccination certificate and the test certificate at the same time through the international recognized system. Next slide, please. Only thing I learned is it's not very hard. It's not very easy, actually. It's a very difficult work because you have to check all the international standards. And also there's a lot of negotiation that is still going on, that our certificate can be recognized by other countries, also by other international organizations. So this is still in development, but you can see from the sample that in the end, this will look like a digital passport showing your vaccine and the testing results on the same digital record. And hopefully this can be useful in the future when the international travel is more allowed for Taiwanese citizens. At the moment, we don't prohibit citizens to travel overseas, but when they come back to Taiwan, they have to undergo the mandatory 14-day quarantine. And that means the willingness of Taiwanese citizens to travel abroad now is very, very limited. But we hope that when the vaccination rate is higher and also the global understanding of that international travel on vaccinated individuals can be liberated, then this certificate will be useful for our citizens to travel. And also we'll be able to recognize digital health certificates issued by other governments for passengers coming to Taiwan as well. Next, please. So I just mentioned a few examples of the digital tools, the usefulness in Taiwan's COVID-19 control. But there are still a lot of ethical or social or legal or a privacy debate in Taiwan regarding using these tools. First, is it really necessary to use so many tools to successfully control or suppress COVID-19? I'd like to use the two successful countries for comparison. I think New Zealand is a well-recognized country that successfully contained the outbreak. Even for the current Delta outbreak, looks like it's being well suppressed in New Zealand now. As far as I know, I think New Zealand also used a lot of digital technology, but their contact tracing method is not like Taiwan. We used a lot of these digital tools for extensive contact tracing. But in New Zealand, their contact tracing is still carried out in a more conventional way without using lots of mobile phone application or telecommunications data. But New Zealand is still able to contain the outbreak successfully. While in Taiwan, we still tend to depend on those digital tools going hand in hand with our conventional contact tracing methods. We think that this can help save time and energy for our public health officials in all these paperwork or in those telephone-based contact tracing methods. But I think in the end, there could be some academic discussion or comparison for the usefulness of these digital tools in public health measures. Also, I think culturally, due to the SARS experiences in 2003 in East Asia, the majority of Taiwanese people think that pandemic have to be going hand in hand with very strong government lead public health measures in order to reduce the morbidity and the mortality associated with a severe disease such as SARS or COVID-19. So the SARS legacy has led to high public acceptance and compliance in terms of those digital, newly developed digital interventions that could have potential intrusions in privacy, especially during COVID-19 response. But still, I think the public in Taiwan, they gave like a 70% agreement or trust to the governments in using these digital tools in a very non-conventional way. However, I think the SARS legacy for Taiwan was also, we were able to do the legal and the financial and also public health preparedness in the previous 2 decades. So the legal infrastructure for implementing these newly developed digital tools were already mature, and the law allowed government to use this very special method during a pandemic like this, that is a public health crisis. We don't need to create new laws. The laws were already there when COVID-19 happened last year. However, stakeholders in Taiwan are still calling for a more updated public health law to enable scrutiny and also pandemic control measures to be balanced with the need to protect privacy and also personal rights. So I think the debate is still going on, but at the moment, still the government thinks that we balance the need of controlling the pandemic with personal protection. So some of those proposals that can go even more extreme to detect or to survey people's behavior or people's locations are being denied within the government already. We think that can go too far away, and the law didn't authorize Taiwan CDC to do that much more in order to get into people's privacy, even during a pandemic like this. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, I think as a public health official, I have been personally involved with this pandemic response since the last day of 2019, when the Wuhan outbreak occurred in mainland China. So I'm very happy and proud to work hand in hand with a lot of digital specialists within the government and outside the government, so we can create so many tools together to assist, but not replacing the conventional public health approach. Still, I think culturally, probably Taiwanese people are unique, that they have special public health system and also public trust and cooperation, even when those digital tools sounds too fancy or too privacy intrusion in other countries' point of view. But still, over the past 1 and more years, we have been constantly having crosstalks in technical, societal, and the legal aspects in order to persuade and also to convince people that these are necessary and also useful. And also we have tried to minimize the impact of privacy intrusion as much as possible. Still, the challenge lies ahead that it looks like Taiwan and also countries like New Zealand, we are still maintaining the suppressing mode, even the elimination mode, that zero COVID strategy seems to be still living in those few countries. But shifting to the living with the virus strategy is being promoted also in the region and the world as well. So when our vaccination is much higher in the future, we hope that we have to use other digital tools to help guide our population out of the previous restrictions in order to balance between normal life and also the threat of variants or other COVID-19 strategies. And the bigger picture is in addition to COVID, there are also other public health need and also healthcare need at the same time, such as chronic disease and also how to deal with other emerging public health threats using those existing or newly developed digital tools. And that's something that I think we can all research into, and hopefully after using those newer tools in Taiwan, we can share more experiences and also evaluations of these new tools in the future when the pandemic is under control. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Philip. Let me just stop sharing my screen. And now we can go to the Q&A section. So just let me see. Well, here you have a whole lot of, on the chat, there's a lot of compliments to both presentations. And let me see first if we have some questions here. Yes, we have, let me just find Philip. So what we have first, Sabine, thanks Daniel for the presentation. She says it was very interesting, also for Dr. Lowe. And it says that cultural factors have a lot to do in implementing contact tracing tools. We would like to know more about the conventional methods implemented by New Zealand to successfully contain the spread. I'm not sure if Dr. Lowe, you can answer that, or you can give us some insight regarding that topic.
I think in general, the traditional contact tracing methods for public health officials are you define a period of transmissibility and you try to identify people who are in contact with the confirmed case patient over the period of this transmissibility time. The challenging thing is people forget things easily. And if they don't keep a diary or record of who they have met or who they have been to, it's difficult for them to report that to us at the very first time. And usually in the first place when a patient is being confirmed, his main concern is his own health or her health. It's not about other people. So when you keep asking him or her, oh, where you have been to over the past 3 days or 4 days, it's not something that people will usually think about when he's in a crisis mode about getting COVID-19. So I think New Zealand has done a great job by establishing the trust in the community. And also I think these experienced contact tracers being trained over the beginning of the pandemic became useful and experienced in creating trust first and establishing rapport, and then serially try to identify the contacts in a empathy way. So Taiwan also use similar methods, but we just find that many of the times, even when we think that the client has told us as much as possible about the context, when compare that to the digital methods, results still show that they have forgot probably 10 or 20% of the context they can report to us. And it's not their fault, because probably in a few days, they will think of, oh, I have actually been to that coffee shop, or I have been to that store. But that's already beyond the golden hour of our contact tracing. So we still think in Taiwan that digital contact tracing will be useful, and we'll still maintain an important method we keep using till the end of the COVID-19 pandemic.
So I guess that when you replied, we had some questions saying how we were able to convince the people of Taiwan to freely participate in these technological solutions. In Germany, many are falsely worried that their data will be misused. And also, we have some comment that the same thing happens since they have a similar app in South Africa, but it has been a complete failure. Nobody trusts our government systems. So I would like to ask Dr. Ferrante if the city of Buenos Aires thought or used some kind of contact tracing app locally or at a national level.
In Buenos Aires, we implemented something similar to Philip. I didn't bring the detailed images, but really we have hundreds of thousands of content. We couldn't really in Argentina contain the spread of COVID as an island countries, and also with different social equalities and different social developments. And also in Argentina, inequalities, economical crisis, and a non-island country. And we all know that in developing countries, the outbreak was much bigger, and we even had peaks in Buenos Aires city of near 4,000 cases per day. And you, Philip, said that you already had 16,000 overall. So that's the different scope of the problem. No, first of all. Secondly, as Paula was asking, yes, we implemented a whole process that, as Philip was saying, we built up in the organizational culture of the traditional case finding and active case finding in the community. For example, other diseases like dengue or measles, that seeking for the symptomatic or infectious window, isolated the close contacts, doing all the epidemiological research. But we included everybody in an electronic health record, and firstly on a call center basis, but lately on a tool similar that Philip was saying, and using our chatbot to match first sending messages on push, like and also there were a lot of debates in terms of that the view of the Buenos Aires government in terms of innovations and digital innovations from the population, the community, is quite good. And so we didn't go through some kind of suspicions about that. But even on the traditional case finding methods, we happen to have rejections from, go inside, particularly in vulnerable neighborhoods. Even we coupled not only on digital tools, but also on social support to maintain isolation, probably in Taiwan or New Zealand. Probably South Africa might be more similar to us in terms of that. Mainly deprived populations find themselves difficult to keep on their isolation because they need to go out to work, sometimes informal work, to continue providing their income. So yes, there was not an overall suspicion, but there was kind of an overall confidence on that, but we experienced rejections. Not only on digital initiative, but also on the spot initiatives.
Yes, I thank you, Daniel. Another comment says that they thank you both for your presentations, and Dr. Loy appreciated your comments on the personal burden and barriers populations may experience while utilizing digital interventions. And I guess that was one of the main issues of the pandemic. We thought that the population was not ready for digital interventions, but in every country, either with success or without success, the contact tracing app, contact tracing tools, digital tools were used for handle all the cases. And right now, regarding vaccinations, you have both presented that in this. I like what Dr. Love says about now living with the virus. And what do you think we are going to have in the, let's see, 2022, 2023? How do you expect, like, everything's going to be like it used to be pre-pandemic? What we will find in the near future? Because we now know that the greatest digital transformation for health worldwide was COVID. So what are your plans regarding your job and your ministers? So first Dr. Lowe and then Dr. Ferrante.
Thank you for a very good but difficult question.
I know.
At the moment, our second dose vaccination coverage is still low. And we have a saying in Taiwan that all these non-pharmaceutical interventions, NPIs, including face masks, are like our third dose. So although we cannot purchase enough third dose for our population at the moment, we use this to try to persuade our population that the NPIs are still very useful. And all these digital methods like scanning the QR codes, helping contact tracing, is a way to ensure the society can still move on. At the moment, we are looking at liberating many of these restrictions in the next few weeks. All these like parties or big gathering probably will be able to reconvene on the condition of scanning the QR codes and also wearing masks in crowded settings. We have been implementing those NPIs since the beginning of last year, and people are still very compliant to that. But we know that there is a prevention fatigue. So I think in the next 2 years, we will still be trying hard to persuade people to keep those NPIs as much as possible on a voluntary basis. There will be special mandatory settings, for example, in public transportation or in large gathering, that the NPI has to be enforced very strictly. But for those especially vaccinated individuals, there will be liberation of these NPIs. The bigger question is about international travel. How can we allow those international passengers into Taiwan without a lot of quarantine restrictions? I think the question is about the domestic, our herd immunity in the community, whether it's okay for a few or many citizens to get infected, but do not lead to a lot of hospitalizations and severe cases or in the deaths. I think Singapore is like doing a national experiment in terms of this, and we are seeing a big surge of their case numbers recently, but their hospitalization and severe cases and deaths seems to be still manageable. So I'm hoping that this will help us elucidate the possibility of living with virus even in the Asian setting, that people are very compliant to NPIs, and many people still want to wear masks even if we say we can liberate the restriction. So I think the cultural and the societal setting is very different, and relying on the population's willingness to cooperate, I think the future for Taiwan is still good.
So Daniel, please.
Yeah, just to
Would like to
complement
add
what
something?
Philip said, because what you said really applies with different flavors here in a quite different country as Argentina. But I would like to add a second concept on that, as you mentioned, Paula, is that we probably will not operate the same, our health systems and same system, not in informatic way, but overall system. Really, in certain developing countries, fragmented health sectors, divided by funding or by different management styles or formal managing different. For example, in Argentina, we have 3 main different health sectors: public sector unions like Germany or other countries with socialized medicine, and private sector, which is smaller, with quite inequitable access or fragmented management. So really, the pandemic really turned that over, and we had to cooperate to cope with the increased demand of services. I'm saying not only contact tracing, not only digital service, but even intensive care unit, which here in Argentina, we were near saturation of the intensive care unit beds. So there was no way that we could cope with that without cooperation. And I think that I was making a play of words in terms of human interoperability, no? Like there's a need of survival of the health system is to interoperate not only on information, but philosophically and focus on the population. And also the speed up of the digital transformation. I think we have to gather that, to take that opportunity like a new flag, and the barriers might be like dissolving a bit on that. Probably there are some warnings we were saying on confidence, on confidentiality, but beside that, if we can manage those, I think there's the whole society, the digitalization made a step forward, and the health sector is not outside on that, and we all, I think we all agree that the digital strategy is coupled with the health strategy. It's not an independent strategy, and have to think all over in a systematic way. And that's an opportunity we think we cannot let pass.
Well, thank you very much with this closing, because it's with the motto of our meeting, one world, one health. So I would like Sabine and Najib, because we're running out of time, to close this first inaugural session, and we see you later in the afternoon. So Sabine and Najib, please.
I just want to thank you both panelists. It was great to hear from different regions, and we have kind of the same problems, but we solve them in different ways, and we also see how much cultural differences matter here in what we can do and how we do it. So I leave the last words to Najib, who officially should close this session.
Thank you very much indeed. In fact, apart from the welcoming remarks that were mentioned by different people, we had three fantastic scientific technical presentations from all over the world. We had Ted talking about his own experience and the lessons learned over the last X number of years on how the technology is actually helping people and alleviating a lot of the miseries by applying it. And of course, the lessons learned that were mentioned by Dr. Daniel Ferranti were also emphasizing the fact that digital tools are to assist people. They are not replacing them, even when we have the artificial intelligence or whatever we have. The public is the most important thing, and the patients are really important. Integration is mentioned a number of times as being very important, and interoperability for that purpose has been also overemphasized. The talk by Dr. Philippe Chun Lee also emphasized the fact that trust is extremely important, and integration and mixing the different traditional methods with the digital health tools that are available to us. So I would like just to thank the three speakers, in particular the last two speakers, who did actually allude to many of the issues that were and are important for health informatics, for medical informatics, bioinformatics, and all that. And I do really look forward to the next endeavor of listening and watching the technical presentations by different people. And I do look forward to the continuation of the second 2 days of the conference. And by these three speakers and the moderation, we have actually set a very high standard of what type of talks we will have. and what kind of problems we are trying to resolve, and what kind of people that are making the intervention. And with that, I would like to close this session by thanking all those who have been with us and all those who have contributed to this session and the fantastic ideas that they have come with. And the biggest thanks go to the different audience that have been around by the questions and by being there and by the comments that they have made, by the thanks and by the different interventions that they have made. So thank you so much, and look forward to the next endeavor, to the next part of the conference. Thank you so much.
We hope to see you in 4 hours again to the next
Indeed so.
WHO panel. Thank you.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.